I can serve.
All right, we're going to jump in. So, my name's Chloe. I am the Eco Marketing Coordinator at Synergetic Press, and I have two people that I'm honored to be having a conversation with here today. Hazel Ward, who is one of our current authors of Social Forestry, and Penny Livingston, who is also involved with Synergetic Press as the forward writer to the brand new book, Regenerative Landscaper with Eric Olson. So I'm going to let them take it away for the most part. I have a few prepared questions. Mostly we're going to talk about their history together and the regenerative agriculture and permaculture movement. And I think they're both rearing to go. So I'm going to start with Penny first, and I'd love to just hear a little brief bio of who you are, and then we'll ask the same to Hazel.
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, Hazel was one of my first permaculture teachers, and I got pretty blown away from taking a permaculture course with him and Rick Valley and Jude Hobbs at Lost Valley Education Center. I think that was around 1990, something like that. And so, yeah, and since then, my life has just permaculture has just kind of pulled me into it like a vortex or something. I actually, what happened when I got back from my class, I ended up having these recurring dreams. And I did landscape design. I had a design build business, and I was doing landscape design by day. And then at night, I would be looking at land, and I would be next to this invisible person, and we'd be looking at what the land needs, and kind of listening, and doing that kind of work. You use a part of your brain that's very kind of analytical, problem solving, really deep listening. And I would wake up in the morning completely exhausted because I'd have to go and do it again all day. And these dreams kept coming, and I wasn't getting any sleep. And finally I said, okay, I commit myself to spreading the word about permaculture. Can I get some sleep now? And the dreams stopped, and I could get some sleep. And I never wrote a book. I didn't have a website. I didn't really promote myself. And I made a commitment that I would only go where I'm invited. And if I wasn't invited, I wouldn't go. And I ended up just getting invited to a lot of places. And so as a result, I've had the honor, really, and privilege to travel all over the world and talk to various communities in these intercultural dialogues about things that I think are really important, like namely our survival on the planet, how we can not just be less bad, how we can be a regenerative force with creation, working with creation and composing with, and yeah, and I actually ended up coining the term regenerative design. One of our board members did research and figured that out. And so I could talk a lot, but yeah, so I also trained with Bill Mollison after that, and he became sort of like an uncle to me. We got very close. Whenever he would come to the United States, he would stay with me. And by the time he died, I think I was the only American that he liked anymore. He hated Americans, but he liked me. I saw him on a Zoom one time, and he started to kind of weep a little bit when he saw me. We were very close. And so I learned a lot from him as well. So.
Amazing. Thanks for your brief bio, and we can't wait to hear a lot more from you. No, it's great. I really appreciated hearing about that. And Hazel, just quickly, I mean, Synergetic Press audience already knows who you are a lot, but if there's anyone new that would be watching this, what would you like to tell them about yourself?
Well, since our theme is regenerative agriculture, um, I'm going to play my traditional card. So I'm an actual cultural traditional. I come out of an organic farming background that goes back hundreds of years, the Quaker Hicksites in New England and upstate New York. So I was raised in the remnants of a regenerative culture, the simple living, power down Hicksite Quakers in the Adirondacks. And so I was prime for the education I got and then getting drafted to co-teach the first permaculture course on the West Coast with Bill. And and I think Bill liked me. I yeah, Bill and I got along good. So we're the good ones. Penny, we're there.
Good.
Uncle Bill. Um, and so I learned a lot from that, and I've been involved in so many things around regenerative agriculture and teaching all this stuff. And I'm kind of one of the original prime movers in North American permaculture. I've been involved from the beginning. There, that was
Yes, definitely. And we have another really great video that's talking about that we can link after this in the bio below. And so the reason, like I said previously, Hazel and Penny also have, from my understanding, somewhat of a colleague relationship and permaculture background. So I'd love to hear a bit about that. We can popcorn style that one. Which one of you would like to first start talking about that?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I consider Hazel to be a real mentor of mine. You know, I was more than a colleague. I mean, they really, really, men taught me how to teach permaculture, and I learned teaching with Hazel. We taught maybe, I don't know,
six.
over six workshops together, and they were my first 6 workshops. So I was the newbie, the greenhorn, and they were the seasoned elder, even more so now. It's been 30 years, 32 years.
Of what?
Oh, well, yeah, I think I started teaching in 1993.
Yeah,
I think that was the first one I taught with you.
30. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got 40, basically.
Yeah.
In permaculture.
Nice.
Yeah, Penny taught her first 6 courses with me. So did Toby Hemingway, teach
Mhm.
his first 6 courses with me. And Pina likes to have people teach, I think they call it 5 courses now, but 6 was the standard when that got going. And Penny's right. We drafted her ass. We signed her up, you know. She was such a star at the course and so enthusiastic and obviously gaga that she went right down the rabbit hole. And we went, oh, hello, Penny. Would you please step up? We have an assignment for you. So I don't know how we arranged our first course, but there was a template. And when we taught the courses, we didn't have teachers trainings in those days. When we taught those courses, actually, Max from Crystal Waters, Linda, yeah, he had a teacher's course.
I
That he,
took that course with him
yeah,
and Harrison. Yes.
yeah, and that was in the mid '90s at Lost Valley, I think. Or
This was down in Stony Point or somewhere down in Arizona, or
oh,
no, Santa Fe. It was in Santa
Santa
Fe.
Fe. Yeah, the Santa Fe course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a franchise that Bill set up, and I'm very interested in that part of the conversation because I've been saying in other Zoom calls that the Australians were not happy with what the Americans did with permaculture. However, the program that Bill brought to North America was perfect for Americans to run with. We knew what to do with that. Professionalism, franchise businesses, slates, business cards, we were on it. Americans totally knew what to do with that. But the Australians were kind of scared with how quickly permaculture became a business in
Oh,
North America. So we can talk more about that, but I love that part. And I'm not passing judgment here. I'm just saying, oh, that's the cross-cultural misunderstanding that, or, just not developed, that still has some legs, I think. I think there's a great conversation to be had there. How do we do that? Where are we now? What do we do next?
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that in, Hazel. And just as I'm not that much of a youth anymore, but mostly youth, especially comparative. I think it's really important for my generation, roughly, to hear about, where have we been as a permaculture movement and where are we going. And so hearing that from both of you, and we had another similar conversation with Hazel and Starhawk, it's really important to be like, hey, what are the roots? And of course, getting into more indigenous roots, and that's really important to talk about as well. But also, like, there's a whole now, 30 to 40 years that we should be talking about that we haven't been. And so I think it's important because it is such a business. It's too much of a business now, and it's now important to bring those pieces back together. So I would love to end on those pieces. But yeah, before we get too far, I just wanted to hear more of that history unpacking. And yeah, Penny, also where, I think Hazel posed a great question before we even started, which is, yeah, what primed you for permaculture, and why are you so interested in it? I would love to hear the answer.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll answer that now. Well, back in when I was a youngin', I was I was kind of part of the Back to the Land movement. I did a lot of homesteading. I was a weaver. I wove a lot of, I was a fiber artist and wove a lot of fabric and made a lot of handwoven clothing, and then and all practical, and at the same time, I had kids, and I had this huge garden, and I used to sell produce I called it uncertified organic, and cut flowers and things like that, and baked my own bread and made jam and preserves, and we built a passive solar house, the only one in West Marin in 1970. It was about 1975 we built that. And then there was a magazine. I don't know if you remember Whole Earth Review, Coevolution Quarterly, and those, I think it was Coevolution Quarterly. There would be all these designs in there of how to build a gray water system or how to do this or that. And I would look at them and build them, and a lot of them failed miserably. Like, don't put screens in your gray water system, things like that. And but yeah, so I came to the permaculture course with skills. The surprising part for me was I was actually incredibly shy, if you can believe it. The thought of standing up in front of a group of people was absolutely terrifying. And I did take a teacher training course with Leah Harrison and Max Lindiger, and Max was a very kind man, and Leah I called her just the ice queen. I mean, she would just see any insecurity and just call it out in front of 40 people. And I did and she would just, anything she saw, nervousness or anything, she would just say it out loud in front of everybody. So when I got up in front, I had to present for 15 minutes, something about permaculture. And I stood up in front of, and I was like clinging my notes and put sweaty palms and, felt like I was dry mouth and knees knocking. And I was terrified to speak in front of people. And she didn't catch it. She didn't see it. And I thought, wow, I'm not as transparent as I thought I was. And that just gave me the confidence to be able to talk in front of groups. That was the beginning. And then after making a fool out of myself in front of hundreds of people and not dying as a result, I'm over it now. I can do it. But that was the part that I did not have, that skill, the skill of storytelling. And I think I learned a lot of that from Hazel. actually.
I took Toastmasters in 7th grade.
Mm,
It was part of the high school curriculum.
wow.
Yeah, I was remembering this recently, and I went, oh, I bet that's where I got a lot of my chops. So it's from the Toastmasters course, which is kind of weird because Toastmasters was like the business community. Yeah.
Hmm.
Chamber of Commerce.
Mhm.
Okay, I just learned some things about Penny I didn't know or forgot or something, but I love the textile part.
Yeah, I'm back at it again. There's a fiber artist group. I'm weaving again. In fact, I'm toying with my yarn right now. I've got some
Ah.
yarn.
Wow.
I
It keeps you not nervous, right?
well, I'm just twisting it and looking at the
No,
colors
I'm kidding.
while I'm talking to you guys. And
But weaving things together, understanding systems, multi-dimensions, mapping, counting, remembering, visioning, planning. Textiles are like really the basis. And there's a wonderful book, The Archaeology of Textiles, called Women's Work, by Elizabeth Barber, Wayland,
that
Elizabeth
book.
Barber Wayland. Yeah.
Uh,
So, um, so I loved hearing that. And yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's great. And then and it's just funny, I just wanted to say that I didn't say it earlier, but the way Hazel you were talking about Penny is the way I heard Penny talking about Eric in our in-person panel not that long ago. So it's nice to see that meta happening, and it's really beautiful to see the lineage in that way as well. And I'm curious, Penny, also, Hazel wrote this whole book called Social Forestry, and of course, there's so much beautiful storytelling happening in there, and it's very poetic and very grounded. So I'm just curious, what is your take on social forestry, and how do you see it as part of permaculture?
well, I think I learned this. I mean, the first time I heard the term was from Hazel, social forestry. I haven't heard that term anywhere else. And there's agroforestry, and then there's social forestry, and I see social forestry, correct me if I'm wrong, Hazel, as being the human interface with the forest. The human, the tending, the harvesting, it's an important piece because people, even now, I'm faced with this here in Washington, where there's these conservation organizations that have control of land, and it's kind of like take only pictures, leave only footprints, which is probably a good idea in some cases, but these forests need tending. They're senescing on themselves. They're closing in on themselves. And I just did a walkthrough at the Whidbey Institute, actually, where the Chinooks, and there's an easement, a conservation easement there, and the board won't let them touch anything. And there's these alders that are dying. I said, we should coppice them, and like, we can't. They need to be coppiced so that they can stimulate new growth and be healthy again. They're just bug eaten and dying. But so I guess my point is the idea of social forestry is that the forest needs the humans as much as the humans need the forest. Is a very important concept that we need to get into civilization today, because that has gotten lost as people consider humans to be like the scourge of the earth, or that all that we can do is damage, which is so not true. I mean, that's what permaculture is about. And the social forestry aspect is, I think, how humans, what the relationship is between the forest and people. I don't know, did I get that right, Hazel? Okay, good.
Yeah. So let me jump in here and tell a story. So I live in the Little Applegate Canyon where I've been working for 40 years and 25 years on this one piece of property, Wolf Gulch. And the farming has failed at Wolf Gulch, traditional farming. There are other types of farming. There's dry farming and there's all kinds of different farming. So, but everyone's freaking out. Kirstie Alley just died last year, and she has a big piece of property adjacent to us. And up the canyon, there's a Santa Barbara crew who got Trillium Trout Farm. And
Mm,
90+% of the Doug firs have died. And a significant number of the cedars and the pines have died from heat stress, not drought, from scorch, from
wow.
being scorched. And I need to take a quick break. So pause and I'll be right back. It's something Penny knows about me.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, no problem. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's
I really don't like that feature. Um,
um, thus I'm making fun of it. Okay, so the point I want to make here is that it looks like the forest is dying. It looks like an ecological disaster, but what we're actually experiencing is an artifact of colonization.
Oh, yeah.
These forests are severely overstocked. And
Mhm.
Dakobede Day of the Athabascan language group, who tended for thousands of years the Little Applegate Valley using burning,
Mhm.
scale burning, cool broad scale burning, um, were tending this land beautifully. And the salmon runs were incredible, and the bulbs and the medicinals and the nuts and the basketry materials and the so that's social forestry is
Yeah.
tending. And I'm like talking about tending wildlands, which is different from the concept of wilderness, which Penny was speaking to. In my book, I have a Venn diagram with conservation and social forestry and horticulture. So conservation has some good things involved, but it's like scary, it's like
Mhm.
been very difficult. This has not worked very well. Now, a good shout out for Nature Conservancy is that they're bringing fire back. So
Mhm.
Trex things, etc. But they're still trying to use wildness to deal with wildness, and they're not talking about humans. So my definition of social forestry is put the humans back in the woods, get the
Right.
machines out. So
Right.
right
Right.
right now, the Forest Service has and the BLM has been shut down so tight by environmental protests because
Mhm.
of their inappropriate forestry practices, clear cutting
Right.
and heavy machinery and soil destruction, that the Forest Service and BLM have figured out that roadside logging is under a different set of laws because of Old English law and what's called the prism of the road. And so they're now logging across from me and have been for a month and a half. I feel like I'm in a war zone. There's like all this big, huge, heavy equipment. They now have machines that can take a small tree, put it on the back of the machine, strip all the branches off, put it on a truck. So it's amazing that we're at this end of craziness and about to transition back into salmon, beaver, and fire.
Nice. Yeah, interesting you said that because I was doing a walkthrough with the forester at this. I'm talking about the Whidbey Institute now because that's a land I've been interacting with, and it's one of my. I'm starting to gain some ambition back to actually work on a project, and this might be my project. And but the forester, he was saying, well, I got to figure out the equipment and the skids to get I said, hey, we do a workshop, you'd be blown away by the power of 20 people to get those logs out, and he was just like, it was kind of like pooh, like he hadn't thought about that really you could just use people power. I'm like, heck yeah, it's amazing what a group of people can get done if you're organized and have the tools. So
I
we're
love
gonna
wheelbarrows.
do that. You love what?
Wheelbarrows.
Yeah,
Um,
wheelbarrows.
so the forestry systems that I'm working on are trails instead of roads, and barrels are used, and those trails are fire lines. So
Mhm.
the so your tended forest is broken up into parcels, and those lines are laid out on key line patterns, and everything works. And it's quite productive, and people can move a whole bunch of material. Now, I'm personally, if we had those 20,000 people, I'm going to up the ante here, we'd be laying down all these dead trees, which right now are standing fire hazard, as carbon sequestration. If
Yeah,
we
on
can be
contour.
on contour, if we can drop all these dead trees on contour and ground contact, that's really long term. That's
That's what we're
very long
talking about.
term, really good carbon sequestration.
Well, there's some potential here now because I don't know, I'm not totally up on this climate core that Joe Biden, I believe he actually got the funding for. And I think it's in the billions of dollars of this climate core, which could result in funding for ecosystem restoration projects and reforestation and doing exactly what you're talking about in terms of getting the fuel load out of the air and back in the ground where it belongs.
Well,
Yeah.
so far, it's still about getting the cutout. So, like I said, now they're doing roadside logging. They're declaring the roads to be fire breaks, and that's an opportunity to extract timber.
Mm.
And so ecological restoration always comes back to timber extraction. So we really need to talk about colonization. We need to talk about imperialism. We need to talk about indigenous First Nations. And we need to talk about the actual land itself. What does the land want? Which
Mm.
is a difficult thing. I mean, it's not an easy assessment. One needs to pay attention. So the part of modern times that I like is instrumentation, mapping, assessment. You know, there's incredible things that we could use from satellite data for real ecological restoration, which again is, excuse me, I'm going to pull out this bumper sticker: beaver, salmon, and fire. So, how do we do this? Well, people, young people nowadays are missing a couple of very important things. One is actual skills, hand skills.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with too much screen time and how we've all been addicted,
Mm-hmm.
or bought in or whatever. And the second thing is access to land. Access to land is very difficult. Penny, back in the day, we had cheap land and we could pretend to be homesteaders.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can homestead anymore. It's all about land speculation and very fast turnover, and it's completely inaccessible. Like, how do you do that? So, in
Yeah.
the social forestry that I imagine, we have a kind of a feudal system with cottagers who are on mansion centered large tracts of property. Now, interestingly, in Southern Oregon, after the green rush failed, the marijuana um, bubble, the banks are no longer willing to finance large pieces of rural property. The fire hazard's too big, the insurance companies are backing out, so they want huge down payments. And this is not thought out. And this is very important point that I'm going to make right now, because I had Church of Pizza with Doug last night, so I'm on top of this. We have a situation right now where we're not able to think um, about how things happen. We really need to be thinking in systems theory. And instead, we keep thinking, oh, if we can change the policy. So, Penny's point about the Biden restoration program, that's attempting to be policy driven. But
I know.
policy is not happening. The politics, and it's just not working. And every time a policy is brought forward, it gets gamed
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
It immediately gets turned into a profit source. That's called extractive colonialism. And we ourselves are being extracted through screen time. Hello, screen time. And
Data, getting our data.
this is a big thing. How do we think in systems? How do we understand what's going on? How do we get real about what we're caught up in? It's almost like it is a spiritual question about centering, about understanding reality, and then about looking at what the land wants and coming together as a community to go through a process different than permaculture design. I would call it spokes council, watershed, or excuse me, drainage basin councils, a sort of a salon, spokes council, syndicalist process, which is a different way of doing things. So this is one of the reasons I say, and I'm this is I'm sneaking into another question for Penny. Um, I really think permaculture design is wonderful for what it is. And oh my God, people have loved to learn about it. But I think it's only one tool in our basket. We
Well,
have
it's because it got defined that way by Bill. You know,
got
he,
narrowed by
oh,
Bill.
yes, it
Okay.
did. Yes.
He thought it was an emergency situation, right? And so he was applying a tactic.
I
Is
think
that
he was worried that people were going to be going like, let's all get together and hold hands and embrace our inner permaculture. And, you know, he wanted to keep it in the practical. And that was actually when I made the decision to start an organization to take it away from the Permaculture Institute of Northern California to the Regenerative Design Institute. Because permaculture, I believe, was poised to actually be that umbrella. But then Bill pulled it in. And he started to say, well, if it's not in the designer's manual, it's not permaculture. That was not his original intention, by the way. He intended that book to be just, this is, you know, it was written, when was 1978 or something like that. And he said, this is not intended to be a fixed document. It's like, this is some of the best practices that we know of right now. And his original intention was to have it be very fluid and non-dogmatic. But then I don't know what happened, but him and maybe Jeff Lawton got together, and Jeff was like, there will be no metaphysics in permaculture. And I'm talking to my indigenous friends who they've invited me, they've been colonized too, you know. So permaculture really became a response to colonization, particularly with the indigenous communities that I've been working with anyway, that actually really acknowledge, like, we need to relearn, we need to reinvent who we are in modern times. We need to deal with the trauma, you know, all this stuff that's happened. And so yeah, and we were kind of joking, because when you start working with the land and you start doing social forestry and you start doing, you know, permaculture practices and growing your food and looking at, you know, how nature responds to our activities. That sounds weird to even say that, because we are nature, but how, you know, what's the cause and effect of what we do, and really becoming literate in terms of understanding the impact of our actions. How can you not become metaphysical? I mean, you start seeing the magic of creation and the wonder and the awe and the perfection and the synchronicity and all of these things. And it does become kind of a spiritual experience if you're really, really applying yourself to relationship with creation. So I think that was a mistake, you know, that he did when he tried to pull it back and keep it only in, you know, this little vein. So as a result, I agree with you that it's a tool. It's become a tool in our toolkit. It could have been something different, but it is a tool.
it was heroic? I mean, I give all kinds of, you know, like, okay, somebody tried. Good.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. I mean, the principles are brilliant, I think. You
Yep.
know, it seems to work. I'm a real proponent of the PDC, Permaculture Design Certification course, and its curriculum. And you can teach permaculture any way you want, but if you're going to call it a PDC, I'm a strong proponent of the curriculum, that because it's got a fluidity in there. You can focus on tropical, you can focus on temperate, you can focus on dry land, you can focus on urban within the curriculum as a whole. I think it's quite brilliant. I'm teaching an online course right now with Ecoversity that had, the last class had 47 people from 47 different countries in it. And it's amazing. And the design projects are stellar. They're just like some of the best I've ever seen. It's a 6-month training, but we have the opportunity with that kind of time to really go deep into how to facilitate a meeting, you know, how to listen to your heart, you know, how to listen to others, how to release judgment. I mean, we go into some other, you know, more personal inner landscape, inner gardening stuff. And so it has the potential of being very broad and deep at the same time.
So I just did a keynote back to back with Starhawk at the Northwest Permaculture Gathering a month and a half ago. And apparently my talk did get videotaped. We're trying to rescue it. And Starhawk talked about the permaculture movement, and I talked about the permaculture curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And the point I wanted to make was, with very small adjustments, we can turn the permaculture design course into permaculture systems review course.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can walk through all that stuff that Penny just said, and and what I've been saying is, let's put design where it belongs as an incredible tool, and make it more potent, like you do with a homeopathic medicine by shaking it. You make it more potent by saying, okay, now we can use design processes here. But otherwise, there's a lot of other processes and a lot of observation and systems knowledge is involved in order to move that along. So I didn't volunteer to write a new curriculum. I wrote the original curriculum for North America, but you know, how do we do this? How do we respond to our times? You know, and I'm fascinated. So 2 books that I'm reading right now. One is David Bainbridge. Remember David Bainbridge, Penny? Have you ever dealt with
Yeah,
him?
yeah.
Well, he's out with a new book after writing 23 books that is called Accountability. And oh my God, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
What he shows is that you can't do circular economy through a top-down bureaucratic regulation type process. You need to tax outputs. So he talks about fee structures. If you're polluting, you get a fee because you're causing this cost, because full accounting, whole systems accounting. So then I wrote to him and said, oh, I just wrote this social forestry book. It's my take on accountability. And he said, oh, then you need to read this book by Asby Brown called Just Enough. And it's about the Edo period in Japan, which is as close as a circular economy that we know of in the last few hundred years. And it's incredibly well documented because the Japanese were incredibly literate and they took a lot of notes. So I'm almost done with reading this book. It's fabulous. It sounds like my Quaker ancestors. It's what we were doing in the 1700s. These completely closed systems that are circular, that rebuild on themselves. All those principles, you know, that we learned. That's systems knowledge. That's systems thinking and systems observation. And part of the metaphysical thing in systems observation observation is uh, emergent properties of complexity. If you're a person of place, you
Mhm.
learn to see things out of the corner of your eyes.
Right.
And you need to, and you understand, oh, that group of birds working together, I haven't seen that in a while. That means something. And there's a story I learned as a kid. And so
Mhm.
that is traditional ecological knowledge. And every culture has traditional ecological knowledge. If we can like bring it forward, we can like shine lights on it. We can really cheer people up, actually. No, no, you're all good. You're humans. You're useful. There's your ancestors had their shit together. You go back and check it out. I mean, we've got ways that we can move forward at this point. But back to one of my main points here. How do we get access to actually being on the land, to actually working on the ground? And
Well,
that's a huge question.
well, there's some things that are interesting that are coming up. I was at the Biodynamic National Conference in Colorado, and there was a lot of indigenous groups there and individuals. And there's a lot of things around the land back movement. I don't know if you know how much you know about that, but it's happening.
Oh,
People
yeah.
are they're getting land back. So that's one thing. But the other thing that's really becoming alive here on Whidbey Island, but also all around mainly Washington, is this whole idea of let's regenerate Cascadia,
Mm,
start thinking bioregional scale.
mm.
And then we're trying to figure out how far down does Cascadia go? It goes into Oregon, but does it go to Siskiyou? I don't know if does it go as far as to Shasta?
Lassen.
It goes to like, well, then if you're in the Cascadia bioregion, there's a movement upwelling. And there's a guy named Joe Brewer. I don't know if you've heard of him. He lives in Columbia, but he used to live in Seattle. But he's I met him when I was in Peru via Zoom around this whole idea. We were talking about doing restoration from the glacier to the river, the Andes Mountains in Peru. And somebody got wind of that and said, you got to meet Joe Brewer. But they're literally from the mountains to the sea and start thinking restoration. And he has a really good presentation in terms of, well, look, he just points out while it was somewhere in the Willamette Valley, maybe south of Eugene, but you just look at Google Earth and you can see where the damage is, what needs to be restored. And it's like, let's start there and let's start linking watersheds. And so he's given this talk in, Olympia, Whidbey, Bellingham, up in Vancouver, because it goes up into Canada, Port Townsend. He's just been all around the water, giving this kind of regenerate Cascadia idea. And people are getting excited about it because they can see it. They can see the possibility of it happening. And it's working in conjunction with the indigenous Salish Sea community here as well. And we're all in it together. We all have this common goal of restoration, restoring the earth.
Elwha River. Elwha River.
Yeah, totally.
And the Klamath, 4
Yeah,
dams down. So,
yeah, exactly.
so I'm going to wear out pretty soon. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering whether Chloe has some questions to ask that we haven't talked about uh, in her
Well, yeah, just
imagination.
quickly.
Or are you just loving these elders going on and on and on? I mean, you could just go
I
on.
am, of course.
Penny has to come
And then
and
I'll watch
visit
it a
so we
second
can.
time to cut it up into reels.
Yeah,
um,
okay. But yeah, let's
but I do have some things to say, and I would like to end on a question as well. But just, I've been in this movement now for 10 years, which, is not 30 years, but within the 10 years, what I've really learned is I resonate with both of what you say around skill sets. Hazel, you were talking about that a lot, and Penny, you were talking about how the PDC is a framework. It's like, wow, something that you can actually put your hands on and create something. And so I find that both of those are really important. And during this 10 years, I'm a very tangible, pragmatic person myself. I mean, you have to be inspired by something, and it's not pragmatism and tangibility. I have both worlds, you know. I'm idyllic also in nature, but I realize that you can't get things done by just being that way. And too much of the people that I've interacted with in the 10 years, especially on these Zoom meetings, oh my God, so many Zoom meetings talking about doing amazing things, you know. Yet they just stay here. They stay in Google Docs. They stay in this idea of creation so much. And I'm talking about renowned organizations. I'm not going to say them on this call, but you know, I've been around, I've been involved, and I've heard, you know, what the elders did. You know, some of these people, they were on buses, and they went all the way from Latin America to the US on buses, or even on feet, and doing amazing things. And I think it's happening now. But anyways, I'm a little bit rambling with that, just to say that I think what's important for this generation is to get things that are tangible and practical. I have been creating some resources on my own as well at this point. In fact, I'm creating what's called the Eco Village Boot Camp, because my passion lies actually in eco villages. And I think community, whether it's bioregional or in community, is how we're going to get land accessible. And yes, it's been extremely difficult for me and my wife to get land, especially as entrepreneurs trying to fit into the mortgage box and all of those things. And so, you know, creating community, I think, is one of the big ways to go. And that's also the ripple effect. If we're not looking at policy change, we have to think about community organizing. And so I think you both have a lot of knowledge around that, and it was nice to hear a bit of that. So if you have more to say around how to organize, I'd like to hear that. And then just also to wrap up, hearing about if there's anything else that really has stuck out for you, Penny, around what Hazel has taught and influenced you. Maybe we can end on that.
Well, let me start then. I'm really big favor of salon, and I'm going to try to write this up better and get a better set of documentation on this. And we have some new posters, so that'll help. And one thing, I'm going to jump a little bit here. At the gathering, people really love the posters. They really love the diagrams, but young people are not reading text anymore. They don't read. They just look. And I'm concerned that their memory functions, their reading functions, their thinking, and of course, there's lots of books about how the alphabet is a problem, you know, but still, this is a very important tool and it has lots of resources that we can get to. So Salon is a free-form conversation that has some rules, and it can go anywhere, and it really heals people. They feel involved, and it's a really important way to create community fast. And often, like when I taught in South Africa, salon is what the people in South Africa took away from the permaculture course. They loved it because they had been in revolutionary mode for decades and decades, hundreds of years, and they at last had this opportunity to be creative, to create an instant community, to find connections that weren't obvious, and to weave a new textile of relationships. So I'm working, that's what I'm working on, is salon at this point.
Cool. Yeah, so well, I moved to the suburbs. I live in these like tidy, perfect little suburbs, and I am president of our HOA, otherwise known as the Homeowners Association. And I am creating an initiative, and what I'm calling it, I'm not calling it sustainability or regenerative anything. I'm calling it emergency preparedness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because I don't know, you know, and people are excited about it. Like, because we've got the Cascadia Fault right to the west of us. And when that thing goes, I have been assured by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association, and NOAA, that we are on our own. They're not going to come and help us. So maybe I'm a prepper. I don't know, but I've got my roof water catchment. I've got here in Washington, I only need a 1,000-gallon tank, but I've got enough potable water for 9 months just with that, but it'll keep raining most likely, and it'll keep filling. I've got food stored for probably at least that long. I've got my garden. I've got solar. I've got a hybrid car that mostly runs on solar, so I very rarely get gas. And it's charged on my solar from my solar panels. And yeah, that's kind of something that I'm thinking about around resiliency, is using the term disaster preparedness or emergency preparedness to reach people who normally would not be interested in this kind of stuff. And I actually was pretty upfront and said, I'm actually doing this for me, because if in an emergency, I want us to be able to watch each other's back. I don't want to have to protect myself from you all. So if you all are prepared and I'm prepared, then, and we actually have more than enough than what we need, then we can really be a community in the event of an emergency, and it could be like a cyber attack, an earthquake. Those are the two things I'm imagining, because cyber attack, well, the water won't run, it's all run on computers, things like that. So that's something that I'm involved in. But to answer your question, Chloe, about Hazel, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the salon, Hazel, because the thing I remember about salons, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you did, because we would have salons in the evenings in our courses that we taught together. And was there like a rule that said, okay, you can take the topic in any direction you want, as long as it refers to something that was said before? It doesn't have to be right before, but just something that was said in the circle at some time before. Is that a rule?
Correct.
I love that.
Continuity. Connectivity and continuity.
Yeah. So that's something I've nobody else talks about that. That's a Hazel thing for sure. I mean, there's salons out there, but the way they do it, the way it's done, Hazel style, is I've never seen it happen with that thread of continuity that has to permeate the conversation. And then you can be very creative how you want to leap off into a totally different direction and talk about something. But there it is, a little thread of what was said.
Yeah, I mean, your point, in case, it proves that you still remember those things happening even after all of these years. Having that type of dialogue and conversation is so impactful, especially during like really condensed courses like that. So I can imagine how much that would be impactful.
Yeah. No, Hazel's taught me a lot. And I'd like to say, oh, you taught me everything I know. But yeah, I just feel really grateful that I did have you as a mentor, Hazel, and that you did teach me a lot. And yeah, I have it. I hold it in my heart to this very day.
Good work, Penny.
All your
Great work,
stories.
Penny. I sent you out on assignment and you've done a great job.
I just accept that mission.
The last time I saw Bill Mollison was in Davis when I was teaching at DQU. And he said, oh, I've been following what you've been doing and you're doing a great job.
Oh, good. He wouldn't say that if he didn't mean it.
Yeah.
He doesn't placate people ever.
I did. I was like, okay, I'm good. I don't need to talk to Bill Mollison ever again. I'm in.
No, he would, that's what I loved about him. He was so not pretentious. He really meant what he would say, and he wouldn't volunteer compliments unless he meant it. So good on you.
It was a good day. It was a good day.
And I'll have to share the update of DQ. I did a deep dive at DQ in 2011, and that's for another time.
Yeah.
It was epic. We succeeded. It was called Peacemaking in Permaculture. And we had great success. And
well, I want to praise my ancestors I feel a thread here of
Mhm.
continuity. I'm so happy that I'm a survivor, a surviving traditional from a remnant of practical living, and I'm really enjoying this book about Japan in the Edo period. It's
Yeah.
like it's reconfirming a lot of what real life could be like. So the promise we have is that a power down relocalization life is a better life.
Mhm.
All be
Mm.
happier, and there's a lot of spirit involved there. This is
Absolutely.
what we are as humans. We
And
are spirit entities.
and I just want you to know, I don't know if you're aware of this, Hazel, but a lot of the young ones now are really needing elders. So they're calling for us. And I've been getting the call from young ones literally saying, we need elders. So I
Mhm.
don't know if you've heard that call, but there is a call out there for that.
Well, we
Well, whether it's literal or figuratively, it's for sure. I mean, they don't even have relationships with their grandparents most of the time, and yeah, we need guidance as a whole. I agree with
Well,
that.
yeah, and there's a difference between elders and elders. Not all
Yes,
elders are elders.
yes.
okay, so we're announcing that we're going to teach 2 social forestry courses this year. The second one's going to be in February. So it's difficult to get to where I am, but Wolf Gulch is been an incredible laboratory. We've got so many things going on there that's pertinent to this Cascadia idea.
Yeah,
So I have to run again. Perhaps we're closing here,
that's
and
what I'm closing. I have to
I
go to a.
can
Yes, I
I
think
can
we're
run
going
off
to end,
here
but
and let some more tea out.
I'll catch up with you, Hazel, about those courses so we can promote it. So
Okay.
thank you both so much for your time, and it was lovely to listen.
Okay, thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Penny.
Bye, Hazel. Bye,
Talk to you
Chloe.
next time.
Like, let's not make it so